Text to Give is our quickest and simplest way to give using your credit card or bank card. All you need to do is text 610-285-1866 with the amount of your gift and note whether it is your tithe, offering, or other. For example, 100 tithe or 100 offering or 100 other. If it is your first time using Text to Give, you will be prompted to either create a new account or give anonymously. Creating a new account makes future gifts more convenient and less time-consuming. In addition, you will receive email receipts.
Good evening, family. Welcome to House on the Rock. I'm Pastor Markie, and I am going to pray, and then we'll dive right in. All right, dear God, thank you for this message. God, I thank you for your blessing upon my life to make it so that I am a vehicle to give your truth to your people. God, I ask that you open the hearts of everybody hearing my message today, God, and I ask that you prepare their hearts to hear what it is that you would have them understand. God, I ask you to use my mouth to say what it is that you want to say, and I ask that I also learn as I speak. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so like I said, my name is Pastor Markie. I have 4 kids, for anybody who doesn't know, and I'm also a kids pastor. So when I'm up here, there's a good chance that you're going to hear a story about some kids, okay? So my first one for the day, my first story, is that when we started quarantine, I ended up in a one-room schoolhouse type of situation with my kids. My daughter is in kindergarten, and I have some preschoolers. So we made it as fun as we could. One of the topics that we had to go over with her was timelines. And we had a ton of fun with it. We put everybody's birthdays on there, mine, my husband's, the kids, my parents. We put historical events on there that we went over, talking about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. We even put an antique doll on there that was my mom's grandmother's. It was really cool to do the research into that kind of stuff. We also wanted to deepen the connection to his story, to show the kids that biblical history and our history is all part of the same story, his story. My goal was to at least fit Jesus' birth and death on it. So I got out a long piece of cardboard and a tape measure, knowing that it would have to be a rather large timeline. It ended up that 2 inches equaled about 25 years. Imagine my reaction when I realized that to make it all fit, it would have to have been 40 feet long. Needless to say, we could not make it that big because where would I put it? It ended up being 600 years, which is right around 4 feet. So what we did instead, because I still wanted to make this big connection with them, is I did the math to figure out where things would fit if, in fact, it could be 40 feet. So there was a sticky note that was just over 9 feet away from the start of our timeline, and that represented the time that Jesus was born. Then there was another sticky note a few hundred years before that, which would have been about a few feet, I think it was like 5 or 6 feet, where King David would have been king, and that was a few feet from that first sticky note. Then there was another one that represented the time of the Exodus, and there was another one that represented Noah, and then also creation. By the time we were done, the sticky notes were at various points of interruption, and they circled all the way around the dining room and kitchen area, a whole 40 feet. Can you imagine? It definitely gave it some perspective for the kids, and they had a blast. But do you guys want to know what I found and why I'm sharing this with you today? I'm sure many of you guys have already realized this. There's a pattern. You see, creation was somewhere around 4000 BC when God made the world, right? So that was the very beginning. And then Noah was around 2348 BC when people were just being so bad that God decided to restart. Then, at the turn of AD, which would have been Jesus' birth, God sent Jesus to be our example as love and to fulfill the law. Each of these transitional events seems to fall approximately 2,000 years apart. We're in the year 2020, and guess what, guys? It's the year of vision, the year that somehow is already half over and it really just started. And that's approximately 2,000 years after Jesus' birth and death, right? Because his death would have been right around 33 AD. We're due for a transition. Go ahead and say my title out loud. Say transition time. Then make sure to add a big sigh or whine because it's not something we're excited about. I know I'm not. We all wish that we could be back in normal. Nobody wants to hear the words new normal anymore. Nobody's excited about transitioning. But the whole world is in a transition right now, regardless of whether we want to be or not. What will the world look like in a month? How about a year? And how will we finish navigating this pandemic? How do we move forward from here? For many people, this change has also sparked personal transitions. Maybe you lost a job or you got a new job. Maybe there was a death in a family, somebody close to you. Maybe you have new routines, or maybe the transitions that you're in right now are completely unrelated to COVID. I know that one of my major transitions has nothing to do with it. So for the most part, I've enjoyed quarantine for many good and very godly reasons. But it wasn't until recently, right around the time that we went yellow, that I realized there was another reason I enjoyed it, and it's not so godly. You ready for me, guys? You ready for me to admit it to you guys? Ready for me to admit it to you guys? I felt stuck in a transition for years now, just standing on God's word. You know, Ephesians 6:13 says, "Put on the full armor that God gives. Then, when that evil day comes, you will be able to defend yourself. And when the battle is over, you will be standing firm." When you've done all, just stand. And that's what I've been doing for years. So for these last few months, I felt like I wasn't alone. For a few months, everyone in the world was just as stuck as me. And yes, I know I was being selfish. And yes, I know I wasn't even correct because so many of you are dealing with things that are awful, and some of them that are even bigger than the things that I'm dealing with. But I'm human too. When I began to pray about what to share with you today, God laid it on my heart to share some of what I've learned through this transition. And in the process of preparing, I've been both convicted and refreshed. So think about this. What transition are you in the process of today? Where do you feel stuck? In what are you unable to move forward? Maybe you even know how and what to do, and you still find yourself non-committal. You still find yourself not ready to move, not ready to be in the transition. If we were all to compare, we would realize that our transitions are different. But the thing that is so common amongst transitions is that they are hard. I currently find myself staring up toward heaven, shaking my head and saying, "God, I trust you. I really, really do. Can you please just tell me which direction I should step in next?" No? It's not your timing? I'll try to wait patiently. Then we do this a little bit. Are we there yet? Can you tell me now? Man, guess what? I'm starting to sound a lot like my kids. I've been thinking about some major transitions in life. To name a few, a baby's first year, learning to read and write, middle school, high school, puberty, independence, a career, marriage, a family of your own, changing careers, promotions, aging, retirement, etc. And then we start reliving some of these transitions with our kids. Maybe holding our breath when a child is ready and learning to walk, or crying as our children feel the harsh stings of the world for the first time. And it just goes on. Transitions are part of life, and they will never end. Still, what would life be like without these adjustments and the transitions that take us from one season to the next? I know we whine a lot, but how boring would life be without conflict, without challenges, without growth? How bored would we be? My text for today comes from the Byrds. To everything turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. Okay, I'm joking, but yet I'm not joking. This text and what the Byrds were saying comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. And I'm going to read it out of the Amplified Bible. If you'd like to get your Bibles out and start looking at that. And it is titled A Time for Everything. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. There is a season, a time appointed for everything, and a time for every delight and event or purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Guess what? I really miss hugs. A time to search and a time to give up as lost, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear apart and a time to sew together, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Let me give you guys some of the metaphorical where that these verses are coming from. See, King Solomon wrote these verses. He was the chosen son of King David, and he had a dream in which God told him that he could ask for anything. When he asked for more of God's wisdom, God rewarded him by making him the wisest person there was. He blessed him with things he didn't ask for as well. He had fame, he had fortune, he had more wealth than he could ever imagine. And then the allure of the world became too much for him. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines. He made temples to idols for some of his wives. He increased taxes to cover these expenses. And then he actually began to worship idols. Based on the remainder of the book of Ecclesiastes, it is very likely that Solomon wrote today's text in his old age, with him looking back on his life and realizing his vanity. Ecclesiastes 1:2 says, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities, all that is done without God's guidance is vanity. It is futile, it is meaningless, it is a wisp of smoke, a vapor that vanishes, merely chasing the wind." All of that says our works are meaningless without God. And Ecclesiastes 2:1 says, "I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure and gratification. So enjoy yourself and have a good time. But behold, this too was vanity. It was futility. It was meaninglessness." So again, pleasure and possessions are meaningless without God. Let's go back and look at verse 1 for a second again. There is a season, a time appointed for everything, and a time for every delight and event or purpose under heaven. So, a time appointed. Appointed, the definition of appointed, is of a time or place that was decided on beforehand. Who decided this? By God, God, of course. And then for every delight. Every delight is, the definition is a source of great pleasure. Who is the source of great pleasure? God again. And then the last part, and event or purpose under heaven. Purpose, the definition of purpose, is the reason for which something or someone is done or created. Purpose sounds a lot like God as well, doesn't it? So verses 2 to 8 list a whole bunch of seasons. Notice they're not just all the good things. A time to die, uproot, mourn, etc. They're all included. Purpose in life is found in all of our seasons. And all of those things are appointed and to be delighted through God. And all of the inevitable transitions between seasons, too. All of them are opportunities to grow, not only the ones that we enjoy. So let's accept this truth. There is a season for every transition. Go ahead and type, "There is a season," below. Okay? See, we can't live our lives in the future because one day he'll sleep through the night will become one day he'll come home from college and we'll have missed the journey. But we also can't live our lives in the past either. My daughter started telling me recently that she's too big to be picked up for hugs, and that about broke my heart. I can choose to stay there, or I can enjoy her growing independence and the times that she still lets me hold her. Just Monday morning, I was a little bit late for work because she wanted me to hold her, and that's okay. I needed that time, and so did she. As I was studying for this sermon, I came across the story of Joe Barbera. This may not be a name that you're familiar with, so I'll tell you about him. Joe was an overcomer who took whatever jobs he could during the Great Depression, even though in his heart he was an artist. At one point, he even worked for a bank, and he was not good at math. He spent years doing what he hated while he submitted drawings anywhere he could in hopes to fulfill his dream of becoming a cartoon artist. Then, finally, he began working for MGM with a man named Bill Hanna. The two of them together wrote 17 years worth of, you guys ready? Tom and Jerry. And guess what? Their boss took credit for every single one, every single episode. Then, when their boss retired, they finally had their shot. And they were told to close the studio and lay everybody off. Micah 7:8 says, "Do not gloat over me, my enemy. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light." So, I have a question for you. Is your transition a setback, or is it an opportunity for a comeback or a promotion? Set yourself up with a perspective of promotion. You see, transition is God's opportunity for promotion. Go ahead and type in opportunity below. This was an opportunity for them. Because they had to close MGM, they created Hanna-Barbera, which brought out the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, the Greatest Adventure Bible stories, and so many more. Can you imagine if they didn't view the closing of the studio as an opportunity? No one would have ever said, "Yabba dabba doo!" One of the reasons transitions are scary is because it's a risk to step into the unknown. You see, this is where we're most vulnerable. What if Hanna-Barbera hadn't taken off? They could have gone bankrupt. Maybe they would have had to have more jobs that they hated. Or worse yet, maybe there would have never been Scooby-Doo. You can tell I love that as a kid, huh? What if your work doesn't recover enough business post-COVID? What if your kids don't get to go back to school next year? What if the path you choose leads your family in the wrong direction? But this is also where there is opportunity. What if I hadn't listened to God's leading to apply to be this church's children's director? I wouldn't be up here now. Better example yet, what if Pastor and his family hadn't risked so much to start this church? I, for one, will be forever grateful that he did take that risk. Go ahead and type amen below if you agree with that one. Well, because I know you do agree with that one, type it anyway. You see, when we walk, we transition our weight from one foot to the other, right? If I were to run, I'd simply transition my weight a little bit faster. Every time my weight transitions, so when you pick one foot up and you haven't yet put one foot down, you're actually more vulnerable to being knocked over. And yet, if I stand, widen my stance, and plant my feet shoulder width apart, I will be so much more immovable. And I had an older brother, so I promise that I've practiced being immovable. It's awesome. There's almost no risk. But I'm also not moving. Every transition is an opportunity for God to do something amazing with your life, and he promises to do so. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that he causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God, to those who are called according to his plan and purpose." He is calling us into a promotion. He is calling us into maturity, and he is calling us to grow. So there will be a transition, and we must move. We can't just stand still. Okay. When I put my kids to bed at night, they go right to their rooms, they lay down, I tuck them in, we say their prayers, and they go right to sleep. I hope you guys didn't believe that. I so wish that that was the case. Please, guys, so many of you say to me, "I don't know how you do it." But if there was ever a time to be a fly on the wall, it would be at bedtime. First, there are the hugs. I say, please go say goodnight and give everyone a hug. And when they're done hugging people, they move on to the animals because we can't leave anybody out. Everyone say, aw, because I can totally hear you through your computer screen. Then there's, please go to your rooms and I'll be in to say goodnight. I said your room. Can I have a drink of water? Please. You weren't thirsty 15 minutes ago. I think you'll be okay. Then it's time for individual stories, then prayers. And guys, let me tell you that this is where they get me, because they know that mommy wants to encourage them to pray. So this is how it goes. Are you ready? Caleb will go through every single person he is grateful for, and he finishes with someone who is as relevant to our day as the person who is sitting next to the person who is in front of the boy who was in my class last year 2 days ago. Again, say, aww. And Christians' prayers go something like this. Thank you for dinner. Thank you for mommy's dinner. Thank you for daddy's dinner. Thank you for Shaffin's dinner. Thank you for rice. Thank you for mommy's rice. And it just keeps going. You guys can all laugh at that one. Then there are the kisses and hugs. Catherine of late has decided that every night we must have a super duper kiss and a super duper hug. And I lost my place, hold on a second. Then we move on to Eskimo kisses, which for anyone who isn't familiar, that's the one you do with your nose, and butterfly kisses that you do with your eyes. And we unknowingly made one up called monkey kisses, where we just kind of pick all the bugs off of each other before bed. And just last night, she told me that she made up one called a giraffe kiss, which apparently uses our chins. One last time, you may all say, "Aw, I love my kids. I love to enjoy time with my kids. And I know that these are the moments that I am going to want to remember for the rest of my life." However, by the time we get to bedtime, mommy is ready for mommy time. I have to be in constant prayer about being present with my children and available and still being strict enough to make bedtime happen. The struggle is real, and I know all you parents out there get it. It's like they see every little thing they come across as an opportunity to utilize for their goal, which is to stay up later, right? We can learn something from them. Let's tell you about that again. They see every little thing they come across as an opportunity to utilize for their goal. Can you imagine if we looked as hard for opportunities as our kids look for trying to stay up at night? So the question is, how can we have a great perspective of opportunity? Remember when I was up here last and I told you about the study that the University of California did? If we present data in a negative way and then we adjust the perspective to a positive one, people are not likely to change their minds and feel positively. However, if we present data in a positive way and then adjust the perspective into a negative one, people change their minds and feel negatively about the outcome. The conclusion being that once we think of something from a negative or fear perspective, we don't easily adjust our view. This tells me that the first and the most important thing we should do to have a perspective of opportunity is to prevent a perspective of fear. Be prepared for the negativity to come and the fear to invade by consistently spending time in prayer and in the Bible. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." I know Pastor uses this verse for us a lot. He doesn't look to attack us with fear when we're in the middle of studying. He looks to attack us when we're in the flesh, when we're most vulnerable. Okay? Let's talk about King Saul. He was the first king of all Israel. He was chosen by God. Samuel anoints him as king, and then, after he already knows that he's going to be king, the people cast lots, knowing that God will decide who the king will be. Side note, you know luck is a myth, right? Because casting lots is supposed to be a luck thing, but God planned that out. After the lots were cast and he was recognized as the man to be king, do you want to know where they found Saul? They found him hiding in the luggage. He realized how big of a responsibility his commission was, and so he hid. The job was bigger than him, so much bigger than him, and he knew it. But guess what, guys? Our job is bigger than us too. You know how people say, God won't give me anything I can't handle? I call BS. I've been there. I've come across transitions and seasons that are bigger than me, and I'm sure all of you have too. God allows us to go through them so that we can reach out to him, so that we can cling to him and to his word with everything that we are, so that we grow in maturity for the next season that we're going to go through. He gave us the job, and he is the one that knows how to navigate it. He is only waiting ever so patiently for us to say, Jesus, take the wheel. If that means you have to pray until you have the courage to get out of the luggage, then so be it. Saul started his life in fear of the path that God chose for him, and his life ended in part because he was too afraid that future King David would take it from him. Fear played a huge part in Saul's downfall. But guess what? Fear and faith can't exist in the same place. That means to have a perspective of opportunity and to cancel out the perspective of fear, we need to have faith. I love, 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 love the times that God gives me clear answers and I know what he wants for me to do. However, there are so many other times that I've simply had to choose a direction and take a step out in faith. Maybe this is because of the free will that he gave us. Or maybe this is because he wants us to step faithfully into the unknown so that we acknowledge that he is with us no matter which path we choose, no matter what we do. Isaiah 41:10 says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." In my own life, I've noticed that after that first initial step of faith, he speaks to my heart and he wraps me in the peace of his arms right after I take that step forward. Sometimes we just need to take the step. Talking about steps, take a step back and look at your lives as God would, so that you can see the opportunities past the transitions that God sees there. King David did this really well. He was dealt what looked like to be an awful hand. Think about it. He was anointed to be king, and then he was still sent out to watch the sheep. He played his harp for the king and had spears thrown at him. He defeated Goliath, and yet Saul's jealousy wanted him dead. While he was running for his life, he cried out to God, and he pretty much said, "You told me I'm going to be king. I've been faithfully looking at every challenge as an opportunity to serve you, and now I'm further away from my calling than I've ever been." Through more than 2 decades of transitioning from shepherd boy to king, he looked to God in faith. That is a long time. Can you imagine that? A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Let me say that again. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, whereas an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Psalm 34:19 says, "Many hardships and perplexing circumstances confront the righteous." That means we're going to be dealt crap sometimes. But the Lord rescues him from it all. God's going to rescue us, guys. So we have to look for those opportunities. We're not exempt from the difficulties of life, but thank God that he uses them. Okay. Did you guys know that psychology defines transitions and changes differently? You see, change is something that happens to us. Change is the loss of a job or having a baby. Transition is what happens to us on the inside as we go through changes. So learning to rely on God for provision and becoming parents are examples of those. Would you all like to know my process of transitioning? Many of you already know, any of you that know me. You know how people step slowly into pools so the cold doesn't overtake them? Well, that's not me. And quite frankly, when I was writing this sermon, I couldn't even figure out why people do it that way. I just don't get it. For anyone who knows me, I don't do anything slowly. I don't even sit still well. Who of you out there is with me on this one? My coping mechanism for dealing with change is not to think about it at all, unless it's something that I can jump right in, plan it out, and follow through. Case in point, when COVID first started to shut things down, I was in denial and on my way to a Casting Crowns concert. And I literally was told it was canceled and had to turn around when I was 30 minutes from the concert. Then it was all of a sudden real. And I tried to plan out exactly what I was going to do to connect to my kids, the kids downstairs, and to my families. There's a major problem with this way of doing things, though. I often respond to change too quickly to transition. My heart and my mind need time to catch up to my body. That means I trip over things a lot, both figuratively and figuratively and literally. I do this with so many things in life. God is asking me to slow down, to seek Him first, not jump right in, and to transition, not to expect transition to take place in the same amount of time as change. Matthew 6:33 says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, not mine, and all these things will be given to you as well." God asks us to be dependent on Him through humility and evenness of mind. Seek Him first. Think about the moon. It cycles through phases. It doesn't change all at once. And every change gives us something new to work on for His kingdom. If we focus on there, we'll be much better off. Hebrews 6:19 in the NLT says, "This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary." Guys, this was not a verse I was familiar with when I first read it, but it is so powerful. I'm going to read this one again. This hope is a strong, trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary. You see, transition must be navigated. There are still times that I look at my name with the title of Rev in front of it, and I stare at it in awe. But God has been transitioning me to be here for a long time. Did you guys know that I first started serving in children's ministry when I was only 11 years old? I volunteered in every age group of the ministry. I covered when people were unable to be there. Then I became assistant to the children's ministry director, then the children's ministry director. Now I'm a children's pastor. And I'm sharing this because this was a transition too. In this instance, it was a transition that I didn't even know I was going through. And thank God that I didn't know I was going through it, because it was really long and I am not a patient person. During every transition, we have to give ourselves a few minutes with God to tell Him how we're feeling. And yes, He does already know how we're feeling, but there's so much value to you stopping to recognize the metaphorical where you are at. So when you stop and tell Him, you'll know too. Then ask yourself, is this a simple change? Or will I need some time for my spirit to transition? If it's the latter, you got to spend some time to recognize what you're losing. Maybe you're losing some time with your kids. Maybe you'll miss the time with family that you've been having via Zoom or house party, etc. Maybe you'll be leaving a project that you have spent so much time on and worked so hard on. You have to mourn these losses or you won't be able to move on. And for anyone watching who says, I already mourned a loss, but it's hurting my heart again, guess what, guys? God will give you a big hug again, all over again, for the same thing even. I know because I've been there. I've mourned the same things over and over and over again. Then we also have to recognize what we're gaining. Time with friends that we haven't been able to see in so long. Quiet working space. That one's for me. New relationships, new projects, deeper trust in Him, intimacy with family who will transition with you, etc. Transition is a process. it is not a change. Go ahead and type a process below. Did you know that transition is also the final phase of the last stage of labor? I'm going to say the obvious here. It hurts. But labor can't stall there without needing intervention. And we can't stop time to prevent a transition from occurring either. There is something beautiful waiting for you on the other side of the transition that you're in. In labor, it's a gorgeous baby. In life with God, it could be anything. But you best believe that it will be beautiful, because God says in James 1:17, whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God the Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. Guys, God's going to give us something beautiful when we're through this transition. We can't stop the transition either, because change is constant. So transitions will have to be constantly navigated. I have to tell you guys that I have a little bit too much fun with my job. I seriously spent time pacing back and forth, thinking about all of the ways the word transition could be used, and playing with words to come up with a catchy title. I'm still not thrilled with my title, so that part didn't work. But during that time, I realized how closely the words transition and transmission are related. So I looked up the definition of the word transmission. It is the act or process of transmitting something, or the state of being transmitted, or the mechanism by which power is transmitted from an engine to the wheels of a motor vehicle. I think I could write a whole sermon on the analogies that come to light here. We've said and we've heard Jesus take the wheel, right? Don't be a backseat driver, etc., things like that. Well, it seems to me that God takes the wheel and we're responsible for experiencing the road and adjusting the transmission so that we can transition. I know that's a lot of alliteration, so stay with me here for a minute, I'll explain. We can go forward at different speeds. Like when we're driving down the mountain in the snow, we have to put it into a lower gear, first or second maybe. If we go too fast down a snowy slope, we might crash. If we try to pretend we've processed our losses and we go too fast through processing that we can transition faster and we haven't, we'll crash emotionally. We also can't slow down too much. Have you ever gotten stuck behind someone who doesn't know how to drive in the snow and thinks they can go slowly up a snowy hill? Going slow is not always the answer. Too slow and we'll get stuck, unable to finish ascending. If we move too slowly through a transition, we could miss our opportunity. Did you know that there's a motor vehicle drawing to help illustrate perspective and pace? When a car is not moving, we can see all in 180 degrees. So what that means is I can look forward at you guys and I can see everything all the way through this field of vision and all the way through this field of vision. But as soon as a car starts moving at about 20 miles per hour, our field of vision is reduced by 2/3. So what was here becomes here. And then when we go up to 40 miles per hour, the field of vision is further reduced by an additional 2/5. So that brings us in here. By the time we're driving at 60 miles per hour, we can barely see bigger than our headlights. See, to see what God has for us, we can't be moving too fast. And yet stopping our transition from occurring will be about as effective as slamming our feet on the brakes when we're hydroplaning or driving in snow. Man, don't you wish God would give us an automatic? Maybe the clouds will part open and he'll say, go here, do this, choose this option in 3 days at 4:36 p.m. And then you'll know exactly what he wants you to do. Instead, we have to be close to him, so close to recognize what is going on in our hearts, to be connected to those around us, to operate the transmission and the brake. This is not something that can be learned by reading a manual. We can only get to know what to do by experiencing the ride. And the longer we spend with him, the more connected we are to his will. Have you guys ever seen a child play like they're driving a vehicle? They play with the steering wheel and the horn mostly. They want to control where it's going. They want to tell people to get out of their way. Toddlers, I'll tell you. It's the fun part for kids, but it's not appropriate for this analogy. Because the more time I spend transitioning, the more I find myself asking for God's will and taking courageous steps in faith. The more I learn that the fun part is in the ride, not in the steering wheel and not in the destination, because we already know where we're going. It's in the journey. It's in the transition. For those of you who enjoy roller coasters, and if you don't enjoy roller coasters, feel free to think of somebody else who does. You know where the ride starts, right? You know where it ends, right back where it starts in a roller coaster. You're going up the hill, you hold your breath in anticipation, right? Those are our victories in life. Going down, though, is the fun part. Not directing the coaster where to go. We don't have a steering wheel in our coaster telling it where to go. We just enjoy the ride down. I kind of hope that the coaster already knows where it's going, because if we have to direct it, then we're all in trouble. I wonder how long it will take me to have fun in those valleys, to have fun on the way down like I do in a roller coaster. Each step we take and everything we experience either draws us closer to God or pushes us further from his heart. So practice. When you're transitioning, call on him to guide you. When you're on top of the world, tell God and remind yourself that you trust him. Then, when things take a turn for the worse, you've already reminded yourself who's in the driver's seat, and it's not you. Remember, practice makes permanent. So the more you practice remembering he's at the wheel through the good things, the more likely you are to remember that he's there when the bad things come too. See God in every little thing. Do you remember how I began by telling you about King Solomon's wisdom? When he first became king, he had a dream. In his dream, God said, I'll give you anything. What is it that you want? Solomon responded by saying that he wanted to have a wise heart to govern God's people. It is my belief that what King Solomon was saying was, God, I want more of you and less of me. I can do anything. I can rule even better than my father when you're working through me. I wonder how amazing his legacy would have been had he kept this humble desire throughout his kingship instead of losing sight of what was really important. I wonder how much smoother our transitions would go if we would continue to say, God, more of you. Do you want to know what the secret is to being at peace through every transition and during every season? Philippians Chapter 4, verses 12 to 13 say, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Paul wrote this during his first Roman imprisonment. I'm pretty sure he's more than qualified to say content in every situation. He had been through some stuff, man. See, if you can truly trust God and you can say, what I want more than anything in this world is more of you and less of me, and you understand that it is in those journeys, it is in those transitions that God draws you near to him in intimacy, and he helps to shape you to be more like him, then you can be grateful for any catalyst that challenges you to get there. I'm going to say that one more time, guys, because that's powerful. If you can truly say, God, what I want more than anything in this world is more of you and less of me, and you understand that it is in those journeys, that it is in the transitions that God draws us near in intimacy and helps shape us to be more like him, then you can be grateful for any catalyst that challenges you to get there. There are many times when I'm beyond grateful for the challenges that I've already faced in this life because it is through them that I know God the way I do. But I have a long way to go. And there are days that I have to remember that what I want more than anything is God. All right, guys, go ahead and bow your heads and close your eyes, and I'm going to pray for you real quick. God, thank you for this word. Thank you for the word that you've given me, and thank you for the hearts that your words have touched today, God. God, I ask that you just help it to get into their hearts and marinate there, that what is most important is you, not the stuff we're going through, not the things of the future, not the things of the past, but it is in those journeys and in those transitions that we are going to learn to love you and to be like you and be your love for the world. In Jesus' precious name, amen. All right, guys, I love you all. I'll see you next time.